So this is highly embarrassing. I have one dead work computer and I have my wife with her Mac out of the area. So I'm doing this from my phone. So the sound quality might be a little bit weak, and you've got your fancy mic and everything. But the good news, you're the talent. You're the one that's going to be talking. So this might be a perfect time to have technical
Awesome,
difficulties.
man. That sounds good. Thanks for lowering the bar on your end so I look better.
Yeah, well, that was already going to happen. But let's see. So, John, obviously, this is a group of mortgage people. We've got about 100 people in the coaching program. I'm not sure how many people will jump in and out on this call, which is our normally scheduled call, but this is going to go out not only to our coaching members, but probably a much wider group of about 1,300 loan officers that we have to hear you talk. I know you could talk for an hour about your story because that's kind of what the front row speech is. But why don't you give us the 5 minute, Reader's Digest version of who you are, what you do, your foundation, the book, whatever you want to tell us about yourself.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, first of all, brother, it's good to be here. And thanks to everybody for making time out of what I'm sure is a very busy day. These are minutes that none of us get back. So I hope that we can make the most of this time. So tell you a little bit about who I am and why I'm here with you today. Um, I think the story probably gets interesting in 2005 when I helped start a charity called Front Row Foundation. And Front Row Foundation is imagine Make-A-Wish meets Tony Robbins. We help kids and adults who have some type of life-threatening illness to have a front row experience at the event of their dreams. And then we create the services and the communities, the podcasts, the books, and all of that stuff that you'd find in a personal growth space. And we introduce it to a bunch of people who value and would benefit from having access to that. So hence the Tony Robbins part. And that began in 2005. So over the last 12 years, my world has consisted largely of helping people live what we call a front row life and to be moment makers or to make the most of all of our moments. And when we wrote the book that we put out, I don't even know how many months ago now, which we're very proud of, and the book's done really well. It was a big team effort. It wasn't all my thoughts. It was everything we've learned about living life from people who are fighting for it. So what I teach now and how I help people is I'm a messenger. I pass along stories and information and strategies about how to make the most of the moments that we have. How do we do that for ourselves? How do we do that for the people that are around us? And so that's my entire world is helping people to do that. Starting with my family. I live in Austin, Texas with my wife, Tatiana, my two boys. I have an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I'm an entrepreneur, a creator, a connector, a lover of people. And I'm just I'm happy to be with all of you today. I'm a huge fan of Scott Groves. Just want to throw that out there, president of his fan club. So when he asked me to be part of this call today, I jumped at the chance. And so that being said, I'll share whatever I can share today, try to keep it as relevant as possible to all of your worlds, give you whatever I can to serve you. And then we'll maybe we have time for questions at the end as well. But Scott, that's my quick and maybe painless for some intro.
Cool. Well, I want to say a couple of things because I want to make sure we don't gloss over them. We'll send out a video to the group to see, I'm sure they'll be moved by some of the stuff you talk about today about making a donation to the Front Row Foundation. Because I've got to tell you, when I've watched the videos of kids that are fighting a life-threatening illness, and many of them don't make it, but for that one night, they get to go see whomever, whether it's, I think one of them was a Denver Broncos game, or one of them was Kelly Clarkson. And you see these kids, especially, it's painful when it's adults, but it's shattering when it's a child, seeing them at least get to be a child for that moment in time and have that front row moment in front, sit front row at a football game or concert or something of that nature. It's just really heartbreaking, but uplifting, but powerful. So I don't want to gloss over what you guys are doing with the foundation. Thank you for that. And then also two other things you said is writing a book. I can tell you from experience, it's a massive undertaking. So kudos for you for doing that and following through and doing it. And then also talk a little bit about the speeches you give at the college campus. Because your full-time gig for the last 12 years, similar to us. Nobody on this call unless they go get a deal. And I know that's been your world for the last 12 years. If you don't get a speech, you don't feed your family. So tell us a little bit about what that experience been like.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So back in 2008, guys, I left a cushy job making great money with a company that I loved. And I was traveling the world and I was hosting events for people as an incentives manager. So I worked for a direct sales company for 14 years. Some of you might know Cutco Cutlery. I started out selling $1,000 set of knives in somebody's home, with an hour appointment, and then generating referrals and then going and seeing their friends and family. And I did that role for a while, and then eventually became an executive with that company where I worked at for a number of years. In 2008, decided that I was going to go out on my own as an entrepreneur for speaking and coaching and running the charity full time. And ultimately wanted to work with students. That was my target market. For speaking. And so you'll appreciate this, I'm sure many of you, as being business owners, that I left that job with $100,000 in the bank. And within the first year, I spent all my cash. And then the next year, I went $100,000 in credit card debt, all in an effort to call myself a speaker. And right when I thought the plane was going to crash, we caught flight. And that year, I won what's called Campus Speaker of the Year by an association called the Association for Promotion of Campus Activities. But that was the group I had been working with, and from that moment when I won that award, that year I took off and made six figures as a speaker that year. Started to dig myself out of debt, and within the fourth year, I was debt free and I was on my way. And then from that point forward, for what's been now almost the last 10 years, I've done about 40 to 50 paid presentations a year, and that's how I take care of my family. I don't get paid anything from the charity. It's the place I go to give. And most of what I do feeds the charity. So percentage of the book sales, percentage of my speaking fees, everything is tied to ultimately supporting the charity. So I understand what it's like to sell. I understand what it's like to need to build relationships, as the speaking business is one of relationships. And that's been how I've made money over the years.
Great. And one of the reasons that we want to have you on, and yourself and John Berghoff, another friend of ours, and we've had a lot of conversations about this idea of front row moments, but then also living in the moment. And you and I had, I don't even know if you remember this conversation, a very deep, meaningful conversation about 2 years ago. It was deep and meaningful to me about being present, and this tug and pull of, when I'm home with family, I'm feeling like maybe I should be at work or working on my passion project or crushing it in the business world or selling more mortgages or doing more speeches. But then when I'm on the road traveling for work, or I'm working those late nights, or I'm doing what I need to do to grow my business, there's guilt over not spending enough time with my family and honoring my wife and my kids and things of that nature. And I think as commission salespeople, there's always the threat to work more and do more because we know we can make more. And there's a lot of scarcity mindset in the world of commission sales. So can you talk a little bit about, struggling with that, getting over that, some techniques that you have? Because I think it's something everybody on this call really, really challenges, has the challenge with, as far as being present with the family, but then present at work.
Yeah, this is a big, important question that we all have to be asking about our lives, because I'll tell you about an exercise I did a couple years ago, and I think this is powerful. I invite everybody to try this today. Just take out a journal, and on the left-hand side of the page, write a little dot, and above that, write birth. And that will represent the day you were brought into the world. And then on the other side of the page, write a little dot and write death. And that is the day that you leave this world. And then you can work these numbers however you want. But for me, I wrote, let's say it's 100 years that I get to live. And let's say 80 of those are decent years. So I looked at that timeline and I said, if 80 is when maybe I can't do some of the things I could do for the majority of my life, where am I now? And I was in my late 30s when I did this. And I drew that dot on that paper. And to me, that was a defining moment that these minutes, these moments that I have in life, I can never get back. And I need to make sure that they are designed intentionally, that I need to be very careful not to get caught up in comparing my life to somebody else's. Sure, I want to win. Sure, I want to be number one. Sure, I want to make as much money as possible. Sure, I want to seize the moment in every chance I get. But if we play those games and we're not doing it intentionally with the awareness of all the things that matter in life, we can easily get caught up in just always securing the next commission. We can also get caught up on the other side of just taking too much time off and thinking that, if we don't work at all, we might find ourselves in a position where we're missing out on some of the parts of life because we don't have the funds or the resources, or we haven't built a business to protect ourselves and our families. It's a careful balance. Nobody knows the right equation because it's all up to the individual. Everybody needs a different amount of work and family time. But I think what's most important is to get clear about what you need. And that comes down to self-awareness, looking at your life and saying, what's important to me now? What might be important to me later in life? So this exercise of understanding my mortality for me brought about great vitality, brought about great energy. It wasn't depressing. It was motivating to make sure I wasn't sleepwalking through life, or that I wasn't just waking up, brushing my teeth, grabbing some breakfast, heading off to work, grinding, getting home, eating dinner, saying hi to the family, going to bed, watching a little TV, and then creating these habits where I might have some level of success in some people's eyes, but my life is just a habitual nightmare of just one day in and one day out. And the next thing you know, I wake up, I look back and I say, what the hell happened to my life? There is no right or wrong. As I've come to understand from my life, it's about awareness and intentionality. And I think for everybody, we need to constantly have ways like this call to take a step back, check in, and ask ourselves, what do we really want? Now, I'm passionate about my work. I work my ass off. I work long hours. I wake up early. I sometimes work late. I work weekends. There are times when I don't connect with my kids because I'm doing work. But there's also the point of saying that all of that right now for me, I'm in a season where it's intentionally designed, and I'm very happy with the number of days I'm taking off and spending with my family. Most mornings I'm with my children. Most evenings I'm with my kids. There are great adventures that we're creating. But it all starts with a calendar, looking at the days and saying, how am I going to address this? So the fact of making the most of all my moments is being good at planning my weeks and then being good at reviewing my weeks. I'm a huge fan of the 80-20 review. Hey, what 20% of my activities are bringing 80% of my results? What 20% of my activities are bringing 80% of my stress? I'm constantly checking in. I'm constantly looking at what should I say no to? I just chatted with my friend Andrea Waltz, who wrote the book Go for No, hugely successful sales book. And I chatted with her earlier today, and it was all about a series of no's and yeses in our lives. What are we going to say no to? What are we going to say yes to? How do we deal with the no's and yeses of our lives? How do we balance them? And in speaking with her about it, it really comes down to personal preference. But everybody on this call has to be clear enough about who you are, what you want. That revolves a little reflection and then planning and execution and going after it, knowing that today is a gift for everybody on this call, and that it was not it's a gift. It's not earned by you. You don't deserve it. You don't earn tomorrow or deserve tomorrow. I always say you might wear your seatbelt, you might eat healthy foods, you might be safe and risk adverse. But the point is, if it's your time, it's your time. And I remember somebody saying to me one time that there's not a single thing anybody won't do today that somebody else wasn't doing when it was their last day. Whether it's sitting in your home, taking a call, or at your office or whatever it is, that's what somebody else was doing when it was their last day. You think about the tragic shooting in Vegas, and people were just attending a concert, and that was it. Somebody's just in their home and there's an earthquake, and that's it. And I share these things with everybody today because this idea of our mortality should get us into action, should get us focused on being intentional. And whether you translate that into more sales or less sales, more family time, less, it doesn't matter what it is. It's about choices and being really smart about it.
I need a second to digest that. That's really good stuff, and I'm trying to keep mental track of some things that you said. You mentioned the calendar function, and I know you're running a nonprofit, a couple businesses. You're scaling a lot of things, and there's an infinite amount of minutia that you could get caught up on. And, you know, whatever you're dealing with, I'll just go ahead and make the argument that when we're talking about doing loans, there's even more minutia that we could deal with. You know, everybody on this call has the ability to get sucked back into the 80% that's not moving the needle. But whether it feels like it's super urgent and important, or whether it is really urgent and important, because there's some minutia that is very urgent and very important to move things along, what are you doing to manage that, to delegate, to honor your calendar, the things that you set out? Because, you know, I can feel some of the attendees of the call rolling their eyes right now. Well, that's really nice. Jon runs his own business from his basement, but, you know, I'm dealing with real clients and real problems and all kinds of little stuff that has to be dealt with. And I can tell everybody on the call from experience is that Jon, through the Front Row Foundation, is legitimately dealing with life or death. Like, are we going to get this person to their event before they possibly pass away? So there's nothing more important than that. And how are you managing the minutia? How are you managing your client, your calendar? What tricks are you using? What software are you using? I'd love to hear more about you managing your week, because it sounds like that's where it all starts.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this, you know, and it's hard to credit all the different people of where I've gotten these ideas. So let me just say this, that a lot of what I share are ideas I've learned from other people. And honestly, it would sound like I would constantly stop with every idea and tell you who I learned it from, where. So I'm just going to tell you the ideas and know that many of these have been gifts from other mentors. The first one is that whenever I look at my calendar, I plan family vacations or personal time first. I plan, where am I going to read? Where am I going to learn? Where am I going to grow? When am I going to get time with my wife? When am I going to get time with my kids? As an example, if anybody's on the call and you've got kids, my buddy Jim Shields wrote a book called The Family Board Meeting. And his strategy was, he goes, I'd have board meetings for my company. Why don't I have them with my kids? So once every quarter, I schedule a 4-hour meeting with my kids, no technology, one-to-one time, one child, one parent, and we go do something of the child's choosing. Those board meetings are one of the very first things that ever makes it onto my calendar. So you've got to look at your life and ask, if it's really a priority, is it making it to your calendar first? You know, I used to say, I told you, Scott, that, you know, I run a dad's group, a dad's retreat. In a couple of weeks, we have 30 guys getting together, high-level entrepreneurial type guys. And one of the reasons I did it was because I looked at my life and, you know, I was like, I talk about being a great dad, but I'm talking about it more than I'm doing it. In fact, even when I go to parties and people are like, what do you do? My typical answer is, I'm either a speaker or a coach or author or run a charity. And one day I was like, I'm going to change that. So people ask me what I do. It's like, I'm a father and a husband. And when I'm not doing that, I happen to be running a charity and speaking and coaching, et cetera. That shift for me was a matter of how I saw my life. And that represents now, that shows up on my calendar. So my first things I plan are personal things, because guys, listen, what are we working for? What are you doing all this for, right? To be number one? In 20 years, nobody gives a shit if you were number one. Like, it doesn't matter, right? It's truly, you've got to get clear about what and by the way, I love being number one. I hope you're number one, right? But the reality is that we have to know what our priorities are. And so your calendar is a reflection of your priorities. So you got to start with time blocking the most important stuff. The other thing I'll tell you about my calendar is that I always block time for just life happens. It's literally a blocked section of my day called Life Happens. And I know that something's going to happen to me during the day. I don't know what it is, but I've got to block that time. So it's all about saying no, guarding time for the unexpected for me. That was a huge one. My dogs are excited about that. I don't know if you could hear that. So, you know, it's all about blocking time in that way. For me, I don't schedule a single appointment before 10 a.m. I don't schedule a single appointment after 4. I schedule nothing on the weekends. And to me, that forces me to be able to create in those prime hours. The early morning time, that for me is my time to grow and connect. Every morning I need to be reading. Speaking of our buddy, John Berghoff, I remember one time I said to John, he said, what are you reading right now? And I said, I'm not reading anything. I said, I don't have time. He goes, I'm going to pretend you didn't say that, right? And he kind of got on me a little bit about, you always have time to read. Don't tell me you don't have time to read, right? You've got to keep that as part of your day. I met with Jay Papasan. Do you know who that is? Who's the co-author of The One Thing, right? He wrote that with Gary Keller.
And everybody here would know the millionaire real estate agent. Jay Papasan's basically written the entire Keller
That's
Williams
it.
library, and then Gary Keller gets to put his name on it. So
That's right.
Jay
That's right.
Jay is a badass.
Jay's a badass. Well, I had breakfast with Jay last week. And in that conversation, we were talking about reading. And Jay was saying how he reads a book a week and or about a book a week. And he was talking about the fact that he needs to fuel himself. He needs to charge. He needs new ideas. He needs new information. And I think that for all of us, the temptation is when we get a button we can push, we want to push it as many times as we possibly can. And the first thing, the most important thing, I mean, many of your those on the call today probably know Hal Elrod. Hal's one of my best friends. I helped write and edit the Miracle Morning book, by the way, but haven't always been a big practitioner of the Miracle Morning book. But when I'm off of it, I feel it. I'm affected by it. If I don't take time to sit down and sit in silence, to meditate even for a minute, to read for at least 10 minutes, to be able to look at some goals, to be able to look at my calendar. If you're watching me, by the way, speaking of my calendar back there on the wall, that's 2 years of calendar. So I can look at a moment's notice and see big projects, big pieces of my life, big goals, big deadlines. That's a big part of me managing my life, sitting down, looking at the calendar, closing my eyes then, envisioning what it is that I want, opening my eyes and asking myself, how does that fit into the calendar? I spend a tremendous amount of time looking at my calendar and asking, what do I need to say no to? What do I need to say yes to? Where am I blocking out the time to make it happen? So, again, those are my morning routines. I block off time with the kids. I block off time for reading. Evening, everything is blocked totally for family time. And ever since I've done this, by the way, I've only experienced an increase in revenue, only experienced an increase in my business. And the truth is, I just don't respond to everything from everybody at all times. I teach people how to treat me. That's a big one. Like even just recently telling people about text messaging. I had to have a talk with the team and I'm like, do not text me if it's not an emergency. I do not want text messages anymore. And I said it a little bit nicer than that. But the point is I got clear with people in my life about where my boundaries were. So as an example, here, you want a productivity or a tip or a trick that we use when our team is Slack. So I don't know if anybody has tried Slack. Scott, do you use that at all, by the way?
We are actually trying to get the consolidated coaching group you're talking to integrated on Slack. Where this call will posted on Slack, but it's a new tool. We're having some challenge with adoption rates.
I totally get it. By the way, I was so anti Slack I was like, really, another tool, another place to communicate? Facebook Messenger, email, text, phone. Like, are you kidding me? I need Slack now. There's no way. But I've got to tell everybody that figuring out how to communicate and taking a moment to understand how these channels work, and they work in our favor and they can help us to be more productive. That was all about taking a step back and saying, let me not be stuck in my ways. Let me ask myself, how could this be effective? Why is this different? Talking with our communications manager, this has now become one of my favorite tools for us to use because I don't get trapped in email now. I don't get trapped in text messages. This is an intermediate way for us to have dialogue around specific points. But we had to outline to the team, why email, why Slack, and why text? And we have to understand the difference between these. But for our team and for time and for communication purposes and blocking our time, managing our time, we needed to get clear. We needed to make sure everybody knew, and then we needed to practice until it became a reality. So anyway, I just talk about, that's a tool that just came up for me as to how I'm communicating, guarding time, and creating.
You said something there that I think everybody on this call needs to work on, and frankly, it's a healthy debate my business partner and I are having right now as we try to figure out the direction of our business in 2018. And you said you had to teach people how to treat you. Yeah. You have to teach people how to treat you. And if I can just, interject with a real life example, I've got a realtor relationship that might have been damaged yesterday beyond repair because in our relationship, the social norm was, email me stuff that's a project or something we need to work on. Text me if there's an emergency. And that's some social norm that we had kind of established without ever formalizing it. And then yesterday, something happened where he just decided he needed to communicate emergencies by email. And we missed the opportunity to get one of his clients into escrow, and there was a hawk. And by 3 o'clock, when I did the backpedaling, because I finally got to sit down and focus on my email, he was upset. He was frustrated. He felt like he had reached out to me and the team by email. And I just asked him, I said, hey, why didn't you text? Oh, well, it was too much to text. And I'm like, well, shame on me for not setting the expectations with my referral source. Emergencies. This is how we handle email. And, again, I can feel people on the call, their eyes rolling. It's hard to tell somebody how to do their business with you. But everybody I talk to who's wildly successful comes back to this idea of setting expectations, telling people how to treat you, telling people how to communicate with you. Because you're right, John, I get referrals from realtors. Sometimes it's Facebook Messenger, sometimes it's email, sometimes it's text, sometimes it's voicemail. And if I'm not checking 9 different platforms at once, I miss something. And that's my fault for not setting it. Don't gloss over what John said with that takeaway, kind of throwaway point that he made. Like, I had to teach the team how to communicate with me, because I think that's extremely, extremely powerful.
Yeah. And it happens with clients for sure. It happens with almost anybody. I think about one of my friends, Amber, who runs an online team she has websites and social and all the good stuff. And Amber's very clear with people about what she will and won't do with communication. When she onboards clients, it's super clear. And one of the things is there's zero texting. There's no texting with her, which is great. You just have to know what works with people. And the truth is that if it's done properly, we earn respect that way. We don't lose people. Well, we might lose some, but I wouldn't worry about the people if we're doing it kindly, with respect, in a classy way. When, like, I had somebody invite me on their podcast recently, and I said, hey, this is you can schedule time with me here. And they came back and said, we can't do that. We can only do 6 p.m. your time. And I just responded and said, hey, want to help out? Love to be part of your show, but I don't do anything in the evenings. That's only kid time, period. And I said, sorry, if it's just not a fit, it's not a fit. And they came back and they said, hey, we're going to work around your schedule and we'll get you in. I think that this applies differently to different people in different industries. But the point is, when we guard our time, when we create these boundaries, people respect them, and that elevates our worth. It doesn't diminish it.
Yeah. And I want you to give a plug for 2 things that I am a fan of. One, if people want to get ongoing tips and ideas and interviews like this, tell us a little bit about the podcast. That's number 1. And then, unfortunately, I have a scheduling conflict this October, so I can't come to the Dad's Retreat. But if you know the dates for the Dad's Retreat in early 2018, I would love to have them, because I think some people on this call are going to be coming.
Yeah. Well, appreciate that. So the podcasting it's in its 2nd year, having such a fun time with that. And I do want to share something in a moment with everybody about questions. I want to talk about that for a moment, because the podcast has taught me a lot about asking questions. And I think that a lot of you would get value from several of my guests. Because, for example, I was chatting with Andrea Waltz today because she was a guest on the show, and we were talking about, how to overcome rejection and dealing with no. So I think all of you would appreciate that. We talk to people about their transformations, how they step up in life, how they make the most of their moments, and how they become moment makers for other people. And that's exactly what you all do. You're moment makers. You make deals happen that are big moments in people's lives. So I think the podcast is very fitting for all the audience here. FrontRowFactor.com is the site. And if you just type in Front Row Factor on iTunes or SoundCloud or wherever you listen to podcasts, you'll probably find it. But we're in our 100th episode or so. And I'd love for you to check it out. The Dad's Retreat is an awesome experience. We're sold out for this October. We'll have another one in the spring. And we have a program where there's monthly calls in an online community. It's just one of the things that, when you think about how you want to show up in the world and what's important to you, what problems you want to solve, I feel like looking back on my life when I was a kid, one thing I craved was more attention from my dad. I felt like he would have rather cleaned the garage than played catch with me. I always felt that he worked very, very hard. He's very disciplined, Navy captain, woke up early, crushed it at work, went to the gym every night, showed up, ate dinner, read the paper, went to bed. Love my dad, have a great relationship with him now, but he'll be the first one to tell you that he missed my childhood. And I wanted to make sure that, just like contribution for myself, family falls in the same boat where it can't be about making a gazillion dollars and then figuring out how at the end of my life to give it back or to make up for lost time with my kids. The only successful life, in my opinion, was crushing it in business, family life, and contribution all at the same time. They all needed my attention. And if I refused to settle for anything less, I would figure out how to do all three of those. And that if I, you either have heard people say this, and you've probably heard this too, you either find a way or you find an excuse. And I was into not providing any excuses for this one life that I've been given. And I wanted to figure out a way to give back, to grow a business, and to be with my family. So the Dad's Retreat is an effort to do exactly just that. Take, kick-ass dads who refuse to not be epic fathers. The crushing it in business and showing your kids how to be passionate, and that being it, it's not enough. And I don't support that viewpoint or that approach.
I appreciate that. So when you do have dates ready for the, I'll put back out to the, maybe I'll have you back on to talk a little bit more about parenting instead of business. And there's definitely 3 or 4 tickets from our office coming for that retreat. Tell us,
I'm losing you, buddy.
Balancing the. Sorry, is that any better? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. You mentioned a little bit about quarantining those mornings and evening times. I've got an 18-month-old, and you're about 5 years ahead of me with your oldest son. What do you do? What do you do to spend time with your kids? How do you connect? How do you put business out of your mind and make sure you're connecting? And it's not just kids. There's a lot of people on the call probably that want to have better relationships with their father or mother or niece or nephew, or the people they work with, without always talking about work. What are you doing in those times to connect?
Yeah, guys. And I think that if you're out there listening and you don't have children, just think about this applying to people that are important in your life, whether it's kids or not. It could apply to anybody. But there's a couple of things that work for me. I'll credit one of our dads from our first ever Dad's Retreat who stood up and said, I have a gun safe in my house. And when I get home from work, I take the phone, and it's a ceremony with my kids, and we put it in the gun safe and we lock it. And it doesn't come out of the gun safe until I leave to go to work the next day. And I think that's a powerful strategy. There's some incredible studies that have been done about people that have one-to-one conversations, and their phone is it's present, it's on the table. If you can see the phone, you will have a different conversation than if that phone is out of sight. There's also a different conversation that occurs when your phone is face up or face down, but it just affects how we are being distracted. So I want you to think about this. The Front Row Factor, the book that I wrote, is all about focus. And to make the most of your life, to make the most of your customer interactions, to make the most of your interactions with your kids, it's all about focus. I've made it a point in my life that when I'm doing something, I need to be fully present with that one single thing. So if I'm at home and I'm with my kids, my buddy Carl Drew, who an incredible guy, mountain climber, literally climbed the most dangerous mountain in the world, tremendous soul. He said to me literally last night, he said, when I try to be with my kids and I'm on my phone and I'm sending a text message and I'm trying to play with my kids, I'm trying to multitask. He goes, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm doing neither of them well. He said, so I had to make a decision. I'm either with my kids or I'm doing work, but I'm not doing both. And I think that's a really important point for people to understand, is that when you're out of work, you've got to be out of work. Now, that's easier said than done. Some people are thinking, how do you turn off the brain, Jon? How do you shut off the to-do list? And I think that one of the things you have to understand is what's at stake if you don't. I think sometimes people think they're good at faking it. they think they're good at like talking to somebody and doing other things. I had a podcast interview with a guy not too long ago, and he was in the middle of 3 things during the podcast interview. And there were several times I knew he wasn't paying attention. I knew he was not. And he actually said to me on the podcast interview, he was great at multitasking, said it was a superpower. And I just thought, I need to call this guy after the podcast and be like, I have news for you. It's not. And it's the reason I'm not going to air your episode. I did not air his episode. I did not share it because he was so not present that it was destructive to the call. So here's a practical way that this shows up. When I'm with my children, I think one of my greatest lessons is to show my kids how when I'm with them, other things don't matter. I love it when I'm with my kids and there's a distraction and I don't look. I love it when I'm with my kids and somebody else tries to interrupt me and I give my kids the full attention, right? You don't see this often with parents and their kids. They'll be interrupted by an adult or something else, and they'll literally ignore their kids or shush their kids because they can get away with it. Sometimes we treat the people we love the most with the least amount of respect. And I thought, I'm going to make it a point, and I'm not awesome at this. I fail at this all the time. But when I'm with somebody, whether it be my children or a client, whatever it might be, I'm going to just give my full undivided attention 100%. So that, our buddy Hal Elrod, we talked about earlier, right? In Miracle Morning, Hal said when his kids say to him, can we play? He says, yes. And then he sets his timer. He goes, I have 5 minutes. When this timer beeps, I have to go back to work. And for those 5 minutes, before the timer goes off, he's 100% present. Because 5 minutes of total presence is better than 15 minutes of you on your phone, a little bit here, a little bit there, sending text messages. And I think that's what we need to do with clients. It's what we need to do with our kids. And it's all about complete focus and attention.
I got to tell you, I'm shaking my head because from time to time I will do that. I will get home from work and leave my phone in the car, and it's such a different, better experience with my wife and kids and the people that are around. And I find myself doing it with team members, with clients, where you're looking this way, but you're really typing this way, and you're trying to multitask and you're trying to respond to an email. And I do it all the time, and I try to catch myself. And when I see somebody else doing it, it pisses me off at such a high level because I'm feeling ignored. And then I also know that, that I do it to other people. So it's kind of self-shame. Plus I'm mad at the person doing it to me. I want to show everybody here your book, The Front Row Factor. Excellent.
Oh, thanks,
book.
buddy.
I've already gone through it twice. But yeah, that full presence, whether it's 5 minutes with the kids or, I have to do this sometimes at the office. Somebody says, hey, do I have a quick question? And I have to say no, because I know it's not a quick question. I know it's a 5 or 10 minute scenario that we have to go through that deserves my full attention. So I have to get better as we start to manage more people to just say, no, I actually don't have time for a quick question. Let me come back to you in 15 minutes and we'll figure it out. Because it's just that idea of staying present and engaged is just such a pain in the ass, but it's so imperative.
Well,
so thank you for that, Jon.
I'm going to give everybody 2 practical strategies for staying engaged with people, and also one for guarding your calendar. So one is my rule of 3 questions. Whenever I'm talking to somebody, I try to ask 3 questions before commenting. I think a lot of people, let me give you a specific example. A lot of people want to help and add value to a conversation, and they'll do it like this. They're talking with somebody and another person says, you say, what are you up to? What are you up to this summer or this fall? What are you going to do? What are some goals you're chasing? Like, I'm going to do a marathon. And you've done a marathon and you're like, oh, we have something in common here. So you want to chime in and say, oh, that's cool. I've run a marathon, and which one are you doing? So we initially want to say something about ourselves to connect or to add value to the conversation or make ourselves look better or whatever it might be. And I try to bite my tongue in situations like that and just ask another question. Just be interested. Just ask 3 questions at least before you chime in with whatever it is that you've got going on. I think that if we do that with customers, if we do that with our loved ones, if we do that as a practice in life, 3 questions, we will all benefit tremendously from that process. Plus, so many times, especially in a service industry, by asking another question, by digging in a little more, we can provide such a better level of service when we know more about the people we're dealing with. Sometimes we think we know what people need and want. We know exactly what to say. We're great mind readers, but we're not. We're not as good as we think we are, and we need to make sure that we're great at asking questions. That's what I've learned on the podcast, by the way, was that also not to have pre-thought out questions, but to really be listening, not with the intent of, I try to listen, not knowing what I'm going to ask next. I try to listen only for like, what is that person going to say that I can literally ride that wave again to show I was listening. So how can I be so deep in the conversation that no matter what there's never a point when I won't have a question to ask, right? I often tell people in my audiences that if you're ever bored with people, that probably has more to do with you than them. Because when you're a good question asker, life is so fascinating. There's so many windows and doors that will open up for you and gateways that you'll be able to enter and learn so much about all the people that you're around when you ask great questions. Make it a point. If you want a good goal this year, how about in 2018, make it your goal so that people comment to you on how good you are at asking questions. It is one of the greatest compliments you can receive in your life. And the most curious people are generally the most successful people. I've seen it time in. It goes against what you think, because you think that the most successful people have all the answers. The most successful people are the ones telling people what to do. But I meet people and I find that, they're the most curious. When I had breakfast with Jay was like, man, you're really good at asking questions, because the first 20 minutes was all about me asking questions to Jay. And he caught on that and he was like, let me ask you some questions. But I knew that was a great start to the conversation, because it would have been, Jay, I'm sure, gets tons of people who sit down with him and they want to impress Jay and tell Jay all about their accomplishments so Jay knows how cool they are. And I was just like, let me see how long I can go with Jay without saying a single word except for asking another question. And I think that's a very powerful way to enter conversations. The other thing I want to talk about when it comes to engaging in conversations with people, and this protects your time, especially if you're somebody that's sought out after by others for advice or coaching or connections or whatever it might be, which I regularly get these in my life, is if somebody reaches out for advice, hey, can you jump on the phone for a few minutes and talk this through? I'll usually say, I don't have any phone appointments right now, but if you can email me your top 2 questions, let's start there. And if we need to, we can jump on the phone later. So I defer from the phone call into a email conversation, 1. And number 2 is if I have somebody that's reaching out to say, hey, can you help me with this? I always say, most of the time, not always, I often will say, can you get back to me in 2 weeks? The next 2 weeks are crazy, but if you get back in 2 weeks, let's follow up. 75% of the people never follow up with me in 2 weeks. And that just shows to me the level of commitment they had about where they were in that conversation. So I have a lot of barriers like that in my life that a lot of hurdles people need to jump over in order to get more time.
I got to tell you, thank you on a personal note, because you had given some similar version of that talk about 3 years ago. And this concept has saved me so much money, Jon. You don't even know, because I implemented it, as loan officers, we are hit up all the time by realtors. Hey, can you pay for this? Can you pay for that? Can you co-market with me on Zillow and Redfin and Yelp? And, can I use you as a piggy bank to help better my business? And I never say no. I always say, hey, you know what? I lay out my marketing budget 90 days in advance. We're in the middle of October now. So you get back to me in December, because then I'll have some room in my budget to spend on marketing in Q1 of 2018. I have never, ever, ever in 3 years since you gave that talk had somebody come back in 90 days and said, hey, Scott, it's been 90 days. I know you're setting your marketing budget. I'd love to juice you for $500 a month on Zillow. I've used that so many times, and there's not a single realtor that has ever followed up for money or time, but it gives me 90 days to build a relationship with them, maybe close a loan, earn their trust, and then they forget about the fact that they originally called me to be a piggy bank. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for saving me $20,000 in money over the last couple of years from realtors trying to abuse my money. Not so much my time, but definitely my money. So thanks for that same tip.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be, we've got to put those barriers, those hurdles for people to connect.
That's awesome. And then you said something else there I wanted to go over. Oh, do you remember you were on a kick, I think, last year on how you greeted people? And maybe you're still doing it, but I love it. I've used it with realtors. How are you greeting people? Because everybody just walks by and say, hey, how's your day? Great. Yeah, me too. Great. How do you greet people, Jon?
How do I greet people? I don't even know where you're going with. I don't remember what I said or what I taught you. What did I teach?
There was a couple events ago where you were starting every question or every conversation, every interaction, which, hey, what's going great for you today?
All right. Yeah. Well, if you listen to my podcast, by the way, you'll know that one of my favorite questions is, what can we celebrate with you right now? Hey, before, and we do this on every staff call. I do this with almost every interaction that I have is, hey, before we get going, let's talk about one thing we can celebrate or one thing you can celebrate right now. I do it on all my podcasts. We do it with the Front Row Foundation staff calls. We start off, we call those front row moments oftentimes. That to me is extremely powerful. And in fact, I want to use that, Scott, as a parlay into something that I think is one of the most important points that I teach, that I wrote about in the book. We constantly get people talking about this, and I think this will be relevant to everybody on the phone right now. So here's what it is. One of the big questions that we ask in the front row is always, who's in your front row? And you think about in your life that you're going through life and you're on stage and you look out and there's all these people that will be witness to your life. And you have only about 8 tickets in the front and center, and you have to choose who goes there. You have to decide who you give the best seat in the house to see your life. Those 8 people are very, very important. And so we teach this idea of knowing your top 8. So my first question to everybody listening today is, could you write down right now your top 8 relationships in life? And I'm talking between business and personal, in general, everybody included, everybody that's important to you. Could you write out your top 8? And could you write them in order of number 1 through 8? Number 1 being the most important. Could you do that right now? Another question would be, when is the last time that you've ever sat down and thought about this? Because if you haven't, or haven't recently, it might have changed. And you must be aware of who those people are and what role they play in your life, because you can't determine what to do with your time and your calendar and your attention without knowing that. Now, that's step 1, is to know who the 8 are. The step 2 is, could you tell me what their number 1 dream or goal is in life? One of the things I've learned about the front row is it's such a joy to ask people, what front row event would you most want to see? What concert, what sporting event? I love asking people this question. In fact, at the end of my podcast, I ask every single one of my guests, what show would you want to see? And it's so fun to see them turn into a child again, to dream again, to think about what's possible in their lives. And for me, the idea of being somebody that helps people make their dreams come true is one of the best ways you can become valuable to other people in this world. And so for most people, they do not know their top 8. Those people, they don't know their dreams or goals. Their number 1 dream or goal. They don't know. So many husbands don't know their wives. So many wives don't know their husbands. So many parents don't know their children's. And so many kids, even grown kids, right? You and I and everybody listening, we don't know our parents. When's the last time you asked your parents what dreams or goals they're chasing right now? What's the number 1 dream or goal that makes them come alive right now? And for your clients, have you ever thought about asking them what dream or goal are they chasing right now, as a way to just understand their values? If we understand someone's values, if we understand what's important to them, we can serve them, we can connect with them. If you want to get to somebody's heart, you've got to know what dreams they're chasing. The fastest way to understand somebody's values and motivations is to understand their dreams. My buddy Matthew Kelly wrote a book about it called The Dream Manager. And it's all about the concept of, doesn't matter what industry you're in, doesn't matter what you do. If you can tie your work or your actions or your missions every day to somehow connect it to your big dream goal and vision in life, you will find unending motivation.
And if you want enough people to help you make your dreams come true, you've got to help them live out theirs, right? It's as simple as that. So next to me, and here's your assignment, everybody, is to write out, I'm looking at it right now. In fact, there it is on my wall. Top 8 people, and in order, and then what dream they're chasing. So you should write these names down. You should hang this up somewhere near you, and you should see it every day. And if you want to apply this principle just to your work, then figure out who are the 8 most valuable people to your business, write down those names, and then write down their dreams and check in with them, even if it's once a quarter. And the easiest way to do that is I have a task list. I have a list in my reminders on my Mac, and it just simply says recurring. These are things that happen every year, every quarter, every 90 days, whatever it might be. And it shows up. When it shows up, I do it and I click it as done. And in each one of those, each one of my friends has a check-in with Jon Vroman on this. Check in with John Berghoff on this. This is their goal. Check in. I'll send them a random text message out of the blue. How's it going with your health? How's it going with this? How's it going with that? And just check in. You've got to be showing up for other people. Too many times we get into this space where this is my final point, Scott. We get into this space where it's all about playing the game. We like to talk about people playing the game. We like to talk about not being on the sidelines. I get it. I want to play the game. I do play the game. But here's what I want to tell you. We underestimate the fan. We underestimate the person who's in the front row, showing up for somebody else, cheering them on. The best fans get the best show in life. That if you want to have all your dreams, you've got to help people live out theirs. You want people to show up big for you, you've got to show up big for them. You don't always have to be the center of attention. You don't always have to meet all of your needs 100% of the time at every level. You can help other people meet their needs, and chances are they'll help you meet yours. You want to build a sustainable business for a life? You want to build raving fans? Be one. For them, right? Get in their front row, cheer them on, lift them up, be a person of value, not just of transaction, and then you will build a life you're so proud of that you'll not only be crushing it in business, you'll not only be making more money than you ever dreamt of, but you'll be living a life that's rich in meaning and purpose, which to me, without that, all that money it lacks soul, it lacks impact, it lacks something that has a deeper meaning in your world. That's it.
That's it. That's all you got to do.
That's all I got.
That's all you got. Well, I'm walking around because I'm hanging on every moment and trying not to take a bathroom break. As you know, this is the longest maybe I've ever gone without using the restroom. But we're gonna buy, John. We're gonna buy 100 copies of your book for the next live event that we do in March, and maybe I'll send you out some dates. Maybe I can fly you in to meet with the group, because I think everything you said resonates with the people that are on this call. The people that aren't on this call are going to be very jealous they didn't get a chance to listen to you live, but we're going to send out the recording. And like I said, I think we're going to push this to the bigger Facebook group, because this is just such important stuff. I don't want to quarantine the information just to our coaching group. So I'm going to tell everybody, you will get, if you're on this call at the next live event that we have in March, you're going to get a copy of John's book, The Front Row Factor. Please check out the Front Row Foundation if John has inspired you to donate a couple bucks. It's amazing how inexpensive it is to send somebody who's going through the worst moment of their life to something that totally helps them forget what they're going through, quite frankly. And then if you love what you heard and you want to hear more stuff about this, I know John, as he mentioned, is very, very guarded with the people that he has on his podcast. He wants to make sure that if he's taken up 30 or 60 minutes of your time, that he's adding a ton of value. So do what you can to follow John, and maybe we can trick him into getting out to our live event in March. March
Awesome.
is a slow time for you, right? Like no student talks in March.
No, nothing. Yeah, guys, thank you so much. Scott, thanks for having me. Guys, appreciate your time. I want to say this, if it all comes down to these moments. I don't take these moments lightly. I treasure your minutes and the fact that you gave some today to be part of this. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, John. We'll see you soon.
Awesome. Cheers.
Bye.